Good evening. I'd like to call the May 24th, 2023 Town Board meeting to order. Ms. Marco, would you call the roll?
Mr. Christou?
Present.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Present.
Mr. Mastriani?
Present.
And Mrs. Collins?
Present.
4 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Ms. Marco. A quorum is present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Dotson, would you lead us?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to make one note before we start our meeting, and that is that the executive session that was scheduled for the end of the meeting has been canceled. All right, I'll now open public hearing number 1, and it's for receipt of comment on the potential enactment of introductory local law of 2023 for the allowance of microbreweries, micro-wineries, and micro-distilleries, also farm breweries, farm wineries, and farm distilleries in the A1 MSMC corridor, B1, B2, and C PUD zoning districts as a special use permit. Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak but didn't sign? Is there anyone on Zoom who wants to speak?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I will entertain a motion at this time to close this public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I
I'll
have
second it.
Second by Mr. Christou. Clerk will call the roll.
To close the public hearing, 1, Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
So 4 yes to close and 1 absent.
Motion passed. Next, we're going to open public hearing number 2, and that is for receipt of comment on the proposed introductory local law number whatever of 23 to amend Chapter 267 Water of the Town Code of the Town of Rotterdam. Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
No.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak about the water code but didn't sign up for it? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and I'll entertain a motion to close the public
I'll
hearing.
make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
4 yes, 1 absent.
motion passes. Okay, we'll now move to privilege of the floor. Please remember to keep your remarks to around 4 minutes. I'll raise my hand when you are close to your 4 minutes, and you can wrap up your remarks. Ms. Marco, is there anyone who wishes to speak?
Yes. Brenda DeRosian?
Brenda Trojan, 1033 6th Street, Rotterdam. Before I get into my situation here, I want to read a quote by Abe Lincoln, and I want all of you people to remember that quote when I speak of certain things tonight. The government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Could you guys put that in your head and listen? And what I'm going to talk about, I can't even make this stuff up. You guys do it for me. Love it. Rotterdam water rates in today's paper dropped for some residents. With all the resources that the town has, between attorneys, comptrollers, every employee, how did you miss 4,000 people? How did you miss it? I don't understand. And you wonder why I keep asking that something's not okay here? The debacle with Viaport, now the water bill, the water rates. You guys missed 4,000 people. 4,000. How? That's a lot of money that this town didn't collect. We're getting a break. But you can't tell the residents how much is our water bill, quote, tax, gonna be after this coming year? With this $34 million infrastructure, which you haven't even gotten a grant for yet. I don't know that, I'm a senior citizen. I make nothing. And if the water bill goes up to $400 or $500, how do you expect me or anybody else to pay for it? Okay, that's one. I foiled the town of Rotterdam for, that's the wrong one. The first foil was asking for information of, I wanted to know the number of seniors from the ages 62 and up who are property owners and pay taxes. How many is in District 5? And this was what I got back. This information has been reviewed and the town assessor's office has no record of your requested information. Really? Kind of makes sense now with missing 4,000 people. Really? I come here every year and give my income tax for the STAR program. And the assessor's office doesn't know how many people 62 and over who are paying taxes? They don't have the number? Oh, they told me, come in and we'll show you. We got 29,000 pages, you can go through it. That's not my job. I requested this and that's the answer. Then I forward one more time for the negotiations and a counter offer we gave or did not give to Viaport. This was the answer I got. Your FOIA requested dated May 1st, 2023 has been received at the town clerk's office on May 1st. The FOIA request has been reviewed and there are no documents that are responsive to your request. Seriously? Seriously? You guys went to negotiations? Viaport owes us money. They owe us the interest that they incurred on the $1 million. It is in the lease. They broke the lease. They weren't ready for us to move in. I got it. Give me 2 minutes. I'm the only person that's going to talk. Give me 2 more minutes. Seriously. Okay, all right. You know what? 2 weeks ago, you guys stopped me. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Mastriani, you said we go by the Robert Rules of Order. Please, watch the YouTube. Because everybody that was there, and you guys, went against your definition of the Robert Rules of Order. But it's okay. It's okay that you enforced it when it comes to me. That's all right. But you know what? I got a month now to get ready for you guys. So be ready.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to
No
speak?
one else.
Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to speak who didn't sign up for it?
My name is Kimberly Scannell. I live at 257 Crawford Road. I appreciate the opportunity to have privilege of the floor. I know that we did touch on this briefly, but I know that there's a lot of people that like rewatch this at home once it's put on the website, so I just think it's important to have this open dialogue. As I've mentioned in the past, I do have great concern that we're ill-equipped to make the necessary decisions that we need regarding the permitting, inspection, and decommissioning processes for battery energy storage systems because we don't have any code for that here in our town. And currently there is a 5 megawatt battery storage facility currently in front of the Planning Commission. So I'm concerned we're not using best practices to address its siting. But we already talked about that. So tonight I'm here to talk about Wind Energy Facilities Code. 2 weeks ago I stood in front of you. I said onshore wind is going to be the next thing coming our way. It's better to be proactive than it is to be reactive. Yesterday, Governor Kathy Hochul announced that GE Veranova will invest $50 million to locate an onshore wind manufacturing operation here in Schenectady. While I think that's great for GE, I think that's great for Schenectady, it also means that we better get ready because wind turbines are coming to our town. Our existing code is from 2008. I think that we can agree that a lot has changed since then. In particular, we have a comprehensive plan. Additionally, there's technology that has changed. These things are bigger. They take up more room. Everything's a lot different. So, regulation of the siting and installation of the wind turbines is necessary for protecting the health, safety, and welfare of neighboring property owners and the public. Wind energy facilities represent significant potential aesthetic impacts because of their large size, lighting, and shadow flicker effects. If not properly regulated, installation of wind energy facilities can create drainage problems through erosion and lack of sediment control for facility and access road sites. They can harm farmlands, neighboring residential lands through improper construction methods. Wind energy facilities may present a risk to wildlife, natural habitats, birds, bats, and other creatures if not properly sited. They could adversely affect the property values of adjoining property owners. They may be a significant source of noise which, if unregulated, can negatively impact the quiet enjoyment of properties in the vicinity. And it has been suggested that when wind energy facilities can cause electromagnetic interference issues with various types of communications. Now, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if that's a fact or if it's not a fact. Certainly, construction of wind energy facilities can create traffic problems and damage local roads. So, once again, I'm proposing a moratorium of wind energy projects in our town until we have had an opportunity to develop adequate wind energy code that aligns with our comprehensive plan and also our other renewable energy codes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, did you want that to be part of the record, honey?
Sure.
Thank you. My cheat sheet. That's okay, thanks.
Make a copy and give it back to her if she wants.
Ms. Marco, is there anyone else who? Anyone else in the audience that wants to speak under privilege of the floor? Is there anyone on Zoom, Chuck?
No, ma'am.
Well, then I'm closing privilege of the floor. We'll now go on to our first resolution. It's Resolution 177 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept town board meeting minutes of May 10th, 2023.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by
Second that motion?
Mr. Dodson, second by Mr. Christou on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 178 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To authorize the purchase of 2 office printers.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 179 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To enter into an agreement with Barton & LaJudas for consulting services for the Babe Ruth building.
Okay, is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 180 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To extend the bid contract for grinding and removal of brush, yard waste, and wood with Troy Sand and Gravel Incorporated.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Supervisor, I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 181 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To appoint seasonal laborers at the Highway Department.
Okay, any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani on the question. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dotson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes,
4 yes, 1 absent.
resolution passes. Resolution 182 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To appoint seasonal seasonal park attendants to the Parks Department.
Okay, any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. I'm sorry. You, Joe?
I'll move or I'll second.
Okay.
Whichever.
Mr. Mastriani makes the motion. I second it. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 183 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To adopt a negative declaration under seeker for the proposed enactment of introductory local law 5 of 2023 to amend the town code of the town of Rotterdam for the allowance of microbreweries, micro wineries, micro distilleries, farm breweries, farm wineries, and farm distilleries.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 184 of the year 2023, the clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law 5 of 2023 to amend the town code of the town of Rotterdam for the allowance of microbreweries, micro wineries, micro distilleries, farm breweries, farm wineries, and farm distilleries.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. I'll second. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Next resolution is Resolution 185 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To enact introductory local law 6 of 2023 to amend Chapter 267 Water.
Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
I'd like to thank the deputy supervisor for all your work on in crafting this, and my vote is yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution number 186 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
Requesting bids for the senior center roof replacement project.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 187 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
Requesting bids for 6.3 millimeters polymer modified hot mix asphalt highway resurfacing.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 188 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
Requesting bids for mill and fill with type 3 dense binder highway paving.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Christou. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. Resolution 189 of the year 2023. The clerk will read.
To accept and award bid for fire hydrants, valves, and accessories.
Okay. Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Dodson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Mastriani. On the question, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Christou?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller Herrera is absent. Mr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Mastriani?
Yes.
And Mrs. Collins?
Yes.
4 yes, 1 absent.
Resolution passes. That concludes our resolutions for this evening. We'll now move on to liaison reports. Do any of the board members have anything they wish to say under liaison reports?
I do, Madam Supervisor. The Parks Committee is moving ahead advising the boat launch project at Kiwanis Park in the Junction. We've had a initial meeting there evaluating what we'd like to see. All residents' inputs are welcome. We are meeting next month on June 5th at Jaraka Park. And anyone from the public is welcome to attend as well and offer their input to what they'd like to see at Jaraka Park. And the Energy Committee has established a mission statement for its evaluation of solar code, and has assigned people on the committee different subcommittee assignments. But attention has turned towards battery and wind code, and the advisement from the committee unanimously was moratoriums for both battery and wind. Our next meeting, June 15th, Patty, we're having a presentation that meeting. So we're going to have a meeting here on Thursday, June 15th in this room, and we will have presenters present about the 2019 Climate Protection Act, and about the Climate Council, and kind of where we're at this crossroads in time. And that's Thursday, June 15th.
Very good. Is there anyone else under liaison reports? All right, is there any council member that would like to speak under miscellaneous?
Madam Supervisor, just under miscellaneous, a reminder that tomorrow, Thursday, May 25th at 6:30 p.m., we have our 61st Annual Memorial Day Parade. The parade begins at Warrior Path at Mohammedan High School and finishes at the Rotterdam Town Hall on Sunrise Boulevard. Our Grand Marshal for the parade is Mr. George Van Scoit. And we have Gold Star Mother there and a Blue Star Mother there, it looks like,
Yeah.
which is great. And on Monday, Memorial Day Monday, the 29th, at 2:30 p.m. The flyer I had in previous meetings said 2, so let's correct that. It's exactly 2:30. The Memorial Day service with our veterans will be here at Town Hall.
Very good. I hope everybody can attend not only the parade, but to honor our veterans. It's very important that we use Memorial Day to remember the sacrifices that they gave for our country. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the miscellaneous?
Yes, Madam Supervisor, just a couple items. Again, I'd like to thank the Energy Advisory Committee for all this work that you guys are doing. One thing that I would add to it is, to me, it's similar to taking the time to update our water code, which is 267. It was on the agenda tonight. We have probably spent the last, I'm going to say, 2 months dealing with that code. That code goes back before 2008. And, one of the recommendations I would make is, we can enact moratoriums. It gives us time to do things. But at the same time, we could actually take action and actually take codes that we have, templates from other municipalities, and actually just get into the real work of updating the legislation. And that can be a combination of the committee. Could be a combination of working with our town planner. I know that we have an engineering consultant engaged that's very familiar with the energy, and
At the crux of the
I think you kind of break it.
story between families.
So you got to break it down into its component parts. We have solar. We know we have a moratorium for that. Moratorium's been in existence for how many months now?
December 15th.
Okay, so since December 15th, has anyone sat down and actually began to do any draft, and that applies to the town and the town board, has anyone sat down and begin to draft the legislation for our new solar code?
We have copies of it, and we are in the process of
Okay.
drafting and revising.
So then you come into the winds. There's some very good wind codes out there from some municipalities that have wind or have worked to improve their codes. Okay, so there is good documentation out there. So then the next question is it's maybe assigning some people to, hey, who's going to draft the wind code? Has anyone come to you guys and said, geez, you guys are doing a great job drafting solar? Did they task you with wind?
You're the person to task us with wind.
Exactly.
And with battery energy storage.
So my comment on it again is it's planning and sitting down and saying, okay, here is our wind code, and starting to draft legislation that goes with that code.
But we have to have a resolution from the board to tell us to do that.
Okay, so, very good. So that's the engaging and the communication, because, you know, again, when I'm talking to Joe relative to, hey, what is the advisory committee doing? And of course, we know you guys are doing all this good work. What we don't want to happen is you guys put all this good work in, coming out of that work, it has to be a path, a sequence to how is this going to be integrated in the town? Is it going to come through our planning office and Peter? Is Peter going to now bring it to the town board? I just want to make sure there are ends to the means. I know you guys are doing all this phenomenal work. From the town board standpoint, we want something to come out of this, and not necessarily a year from now. You know, I want to make sure that we're engaged and we're actually helping write legislation that we need to enact on.
Right, so we started by, the committee was formed in February, okay? We've met one time a month, starting in February. February, March, April, May. Okay, so we've met 4 times. We've talked to the town designated engineer. We've met with someone from NYSERDA. We have been provided with documentation of approximately 10 different municipality solar code. So in our downtime, when we're not having a meeting as a group, we're reading solar code from other towns, so that collectively, when we do get together in our subcommittees, we can discuss what was the most restrictive code that we saw, what was the least restrictive code that we saw, what is our existing code, and what is the proposition for new code. And we are going piece by piece by piece with our solar code to do that. So it's a methodical way of doing it. It was what the town designated engineer and the Energy Advisory Committee thought would work the best for us. So I think we've actually covered quite a bit of ground in the 4 times that we've met.
And that specifically has been solar, pretty much?
Yes.
That's all we've been tasked to
Okay,
do
so
so
that's,
far.
that's why it's good, because again, you know, it's the communication of it, because as you know, battery now is at the forefront, and of course, wind is. So what is the advisory committee's position relative to timing? Do you feel like you guys have researched the solar, and we're in a position where legislation could be drafted before we move on to battery and wind? Or do you feel like the next step for you guys is to do that similar research relative to the battery and the winds, and then collectively at the end, we're drafting a solar, wind, and battery storage code? I'm just trying to get in my head the process.
We've been tasked for solar, so we were focusing on that. It just became evident that we don't have batteries, so I guess we're looking for direction from the board. It's difficult to do both at one time.
Exactly.
Should we pivot and focus on battery, or should we, that's why we're asking the board, do we need a battery moratorium so that we finish solar and nothing untoward happens with battery in the interim? So I guess we're looking for some direction.
And some of the correspondence that we sent you from the Energy Advisory Committee after our last meeting, we had a vote, and what we kind of all collectively came up with, our suggestion was the board should possibly consider resolving to have a 6-month battery energy storage system moratorium, to direct the Energy Advisory Committee to halt on solar, focus on battery energy storage systems, and then if we need to go back to solar after that and extend the moratorium if need be, we can always do that. But because we have a project in the pipeline, and or conversely, you could just resolve to enact model guidance from New York State so that at least the town has something in place for battery energy storage systems instead of nothing. But that would be a town board decision, and then we would do whatever you told us to do.
Okay.
And with regard to wind, I would say that it's not a bad idea to be proactive. The Energy Advisory Committee voted unanimously for a wind moratorium as well. So that way we don't have wind projects coming in, and we're ill-equipped to deal with it. And if it's a larger project, and they come in and we don't have, they're gonna go to the Office of Renewable Energy Siting for siting, okay? So at this point, until we can kind of get our ducks in a row, that was what the Energy Advisory Committee came up with.
Okay, and then, so, what's your recommendation, or have you not had time to really get into the details of it? Do you see this as being a 6-month moratorium as well, or do you think that?
For wind a year, because we meet once a month. And while it is becoming a part-time job for many of us, people go on vacation. I mean, I'll still bring code with me on vacation. Patty will too. But, you know, people go on vacation, life happens. We're doing our best. Our plan, I guess, moving forward is to kind of follow what Duanesburg did. But once we get to a place where it's been revised and reviewed by the town attorney and is Peter's not gonna review it. The town attorney's gonna review it and tell us yes or no, or, and the town designated engineer. And then we'll have to have public meetings on it, I would imagine, is what you would want.
So from your guys' standpoint, are you getting enough of the town designated engineer that's the expert in this, or do you need more of his help?
I think for now, we're getting enough.
He's very
He's awesome.
accessible, and he's awesome. And
Do you see him assisting with drafting of legislation, or is that something that you guys want to bring the draft forward to the planning commission, and then through the town board?
I think he helped us enough by providing us with 10 different laws, so we can take the best from the best and put it in ours, and take the best of what applies to our town and our situation, and just put it in.
And if you have I could go get it now, but if you have a few minutes afterwards, I would really love to share. We've put together binders. We have all the information. We're able to tell you what the setbacks are for 10 other towns around here, what the most restrictive is, what the least restrictive is. I mean, we've actually covered quite a bit of ground since February, so.
That sounds like you guys have.
But with the absence of any battery, we didn't know, does that make that more urgent? There's battery storage, it's coming, and we have no code, so I guess we're looking for the direction. Do we halt on solar for a little bit and make sure that we're all good to go with battery?
Fair question.
Yeah.
Very fair question.
Right,
Is there any other resources that you need from this dais to help you do your part-time jobs that you?
More hours in the day.
No, but is there?
Yeah, Megan is nice enough to print things for us as we need it, so we have access to the printer to distribute materials. And we'll be sure to ask when the need comes next, so thank you.
Clearly, as we discussed before the meeting, I think that, if you take all three of these and address any legislation changes or code changes, to address them globally, so we have some consistency, is definitely the path to go. And again, although I'm not big on moratoriums, I think in this scenario, because the technology is coming in faster than the law can catch up, I think it's something that we need to, we need to consider very seriously. Question, are we able within our town codes and our comprehensive plan to declare zones within our town that any of these energies would not be acceptable?
As part of a review process and drafting of the whole point of a zoning code is to create time, place, and manner restrictions on certain uses, like the microbreweries and the farm breweries that we just did tonight. That is a time, place, and location restriction. We're telling you, in these zones, you can have this, other zones, you can't. That's the whole point of zoning laws, and what their review is really going to be doing is saying, these are the zones where this can be accommodated, and these are the zones where it really can't be accommodated.
And where it can be accommodated, these are the rules.
Exactly.
But Evan, if I may, the problem that we are having as a town, as an advisory committee, is that for any project greater than 20 megawatts, the developer can choose to go to the Office of Renewable Energy Siting for being the sole authority for siting, not just for solar, but for wind and for battery energy storage systems, for all renewables. What does that mean for us? It means that we can have the best solar code in the whole wide world, and it can be the best code for our town. And the Office of Renewable Energy Siting can come in and say, your setbacks kind of don't work for this developer. They pose, quote, an undue burden. That undue burden is not defined within the ORIS information.
This is where this needs
It's
to
gotta
come
come out now, but,
It's true.
and unfortunately, so then we're in a position where no matter what our code says, it can be overridden by the Office of Renewable Energy Siting. So all of our concerns, and I also want to bring up something that Renee is her area of expertise. What we're very concerned is a larger project for wind or a battery energy storage system is going to come knocking on our door. They're just going to automatically go to the state if we don't have a moratorium in place. If we have some kind of code, at least they have to come up with a reason why it's an undue burden. And then Courtney can probably explain to you why Article 78 can happen, and hopefully we'll all be on board with that if the time ever comes. But when the budget was passed, and this is important, and Renee knows more about it, when the budget was just passed, there was something called Part N revenue, and it has to do with how these big renewable energy systems are taxed and what is allowed and what's not allowed, and pilot programs. And basically the towns are not making out in the long run.
And it's retroactive to 2021, I believe they're pulling back retroactive to 2021.
Yeah, so Renee can explain, so that has an implication on what we're writing with our code as well. Renee can explain a little more about that.
Yeah, so what it really comes down to is any municipalities that have opted out of 487, and so they have pilots in place. So any pilot agreements that were made with larger solars that are with 1 megawatt or larger, the state has lowered or created a discounted rate, that's quote, a discounted rate. So there are municipalities right now that are finding a shortfall, a windfall, where they thought they were going to have a certain amount of monies coming in to the municipality. And the assessors now have to somehow renegotiate all this stuff. They're talking to their town attorneys. So I do not believe that Rotterdam has opted out of 487 at this time. But if we did, any systems that are over 1 megawatt would be covered under a new law, which is Part N under
Snuck in the budget.
Yeah, it's snuck in the, it's always in the budget, it's always in the budget. It is Real Property Tax Law 575B. And so I don't believe that we have been impacted directly by that, but there are a lot of benefits to opting out. Many counties or municipalities have opted out because they're able to collect something from the solar. Right now, they're taxed nothing. They're exempt.
That's what this.
So that's what this is coming down to. So we've been looking at this, like, should we opt out? It's still something that's available. It would really mostly impact larger solar over 1 megawatt or larger that would be locked into this new discounted rate. So we wouldn't necessarily be making our own pilot agreements. We would just use this new methodology that the assessor would have to use. It would be annual. These are annual now, and it's not a spot assessment according to the way the law is written. But for pilots, it could go down to systems that are smaller than 1 megawatt. So that might impact other areas. It could impact someone that has solar on their home, and you would have to make an agreement, and it's whatever the town decides to agree to. So these are things that we would have to look at.
It comes back to something Jack said, how long do we need? It's really complicated, and we want to be really sure that we make the right recommendations for the town So I don't think it's something that we should rush. As an advisory committee, it's our responsibility to look out for the benefit of everybody in this town. So it's hard to put a hard time
Right,
on
and
it.
right when we thought, okay, well, we had just talked about like pilot programs, we had a subcommittee, and then, the budget got passed, and, now we're learning
It all
about this
changed.
next thing. So we had to adjust and react accordingly and learn more about this. We're trying to cover as much ground as we possibly can.
Well, I think the information is great. It does allow us, to see based on all this research and stuff that you guys have done, to give us a level of comfort relative to the moratoriums, the timing of moratoriums. And it's important we have this back and forth, coming, you speak at the privilege of the floor, but if you come meeting after meeting, here we are 2 to 3 months into this, and then we're finally like, hey, what's being done about this, okay? And I think we've heard this enough at this point in time, and in my mind, it requires some action by our board, based on some recommendation and research that you guys have done, to take some action. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you very much for all that information, very helpful.
I also would just like to quickly add, I haven't looked into this too much more, but you can opt out of other type of energy renewable type systems when it comes to exemptions. And BESS would be included in that. There is an area for BESS. So they are treated separately, and we see multiple municipalities throughout the state that have done that. It might be good, somehow for us to reach out and see how they find that it's beneficial or not beneficial, that get their insights from them. Not so many. Found a nice list of every single municipality in the state of New York that has opted out one way or another. So there's a great resource out there, and we can find out now. Again, some of those municipalities may not be too happy because they have to readjust, but we have not done that, so we know what to expect going forward.
And we know that we're a valuable commodity as far as our location is, but if we are not allowed to assess things from a tax perspective, that we're gonna get some bang for our buck, what's in it for our town? That's what we have to keep asking ourselves. Because I don't know anything about battery energy storage systems. This is all brand new.
We've got the book and
We've got a book and we're reading. Look at my dark
We have Dan as
circles.
a resource.
Jack,
and-
these dark circles didn't used to be so dark. But
That's a lot of studying.
it's a
Yeah.
Lot of reading.
lot. It's
Yeah.
so comprehensive. And I don't know if we legally can even opt out. I know Glenn opted out. I don't know, can Oris just say, well, you can't opt out, we're opting you back in? And can we charge, I think the way that towns make money, but again, I don't really know. I think the way that towns make money is they charge a fee, like a mystery fee for megawatts produced. So that's what we're trying to find out, how do we get the biggest bang for our buck here?
And regarding batteries, something that, straight from the NYSERDA Energy Storage Guidebook, with these batteries, there's going to be a lot of them, and this is a quote: "The batteries are to minimize curtailment of energy and to dispatch stored energy when and where it is needed." So when we have all these batteries, it's in the plan. It's the plan that we might not have enough energy. This is frightening, the whole thing.
The little bit I looked at BESS and the code that is there, and again, I haven't really deeply looked at this yet, but this is what I gleaned, and I need to really find out a little bit more, is they are supposed to have some type of housing around it. So, with this application that we have, is there any type of housing provided? Are they just gonna plunk it out in the middle of somewhere, or is there gonna be a concrete building around it? So we need to look at these
Yeah, there's a
things.
difference between zinc batteries and lithium batteries, and frankly, the only guidance that we have right now, though, is from New York State. I'm just gonna pause there for us all to think our own thoughts on that. But I have reached out to the town designated engineer to provide us with maybe some battery energy storage systems code from other towns. So we have something else to look at besides what the state wants us to look at.
Very good.
Thank you.
Is there any other? Okay, I would just like to make a statement, and if my colleagues will help me. As far as I remember, it was either in May or September, and I want to say May of last year. We had a presentation both out in Rotterdam Junction and then again here that gave the exact cost to each taxpayer, well, exact round figures for what it would cost once we started our water improvement. To my recollection, it was somewhere between $250 if we were able to get a WIA grant, $350 if we did not. Like I said, a slideshow was given both in Rotterdam Junction and Town Hall, and not only that, it was reported in the Gazette. So if there's any questions about what our water, actually it would be our debt service that would show up on your January bill, not your June bill, but once we get the project underway, that's what we can look forward to the best of what we've done and what the engineers have done. So there's no question as far as that goes. You can safely say, I would say, between $250 and $350. That will be showing up on your January tax bill because it'll be debt service for Water District 5, and that shows up on your January property taxes. Okay? Anyone else? Okay.
Supervisor, move to adjournment.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Mr. Christou. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Dodson. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. See you tomorrow night.
Meeting is adjourned.